What if the absolute most important moments of our lives were never actually the loudest ones? What if everything in your world changed just because of something small? I mean, think about a casual conversation, a split-second decision, a delayed apology, or perhaps, literally, a single second. Welcome. Today, we're diving into a really remarkable story through this explainer. And just to be clear right up front, this isn't your traditional book summary. We're going on an immersive journey into Ravindra Nayak's Chronicles of Ephemeral Echoes, Book 1, Whispers of Time. Together, we're going to explore those invisible consequences that quietly shape our everyday lives. And we'll be breaking down some pretty deep philosophies, things like time, memory, choice, and repair, into clear, first principles thinking.
So I want you to picture this setting with me. Rain softly hitting the stone streets of a town called Eldoria. Lamps are just coming alive behind the windows. You step into this old library, and it immediately smells of cedar shelves, dust, and the patient breathing of old books. It's right here, in this quiet, almost Studio Ghibli-esque atmosphere, that our main character, Alex Mercer, discovers something mind-bending. Time isn't something existing outside of him. Time had actually always been inside of him. You see, Eldoria doesn't announce its mysteries with flashy, loud magic. It keeps them hidden under perfectly ordinary sounds, like a shutter tapping in the wind.
Now imagine a bell ringing just 1 second late. Picture a clockmaker in his shop, just watching the hands lose a single tick. To most of us, a second is so tiny, right? It doesn't even deserve our fear. But Alex Mercer, he learns to distrust the arrogance of those tiny measurements. Because in a living, breathing system, a single second of delay is entirely enough to begin changing the whole world, step by step. Okay, so you might be looking at this and asking yourself, is this really just a story about time travel? Are we talking about magical portals and fixing the past? Well, not exactly. It is profoundly a story about how human beings actually live inside time. It's about how incredibly small causes become massive consequences and how the choices we're making today, right now, ripple into the realities of our tomorrow. Think about most fantasy stories for a second. They usually begin with magic, right? They celebrate sheer power, and they feature these chosen heroes seeking absolute certainty. But this story, it actually begins with questions. It focuses entirely on understanding. Instead of celebrating some explosive power, it celebrates wisdom. And rather than seeking out the warm comfort of certainty, it bravely embraces the heavy weight of responsibility. It basically trains your mind to solve complexity without panicking. So let's dive into part 1, the rule of small causes, the first flutter. A genuinely beginner-friendly exploration of time shouldn't start with complex, confusing machinery. It has to start by just noticing that life is made of small moments that absolutely do not remain small. Life changes quietly, not suddenly. As Alex realizes, a cause is not a dot, it's a thread. A beginner often imagines the past as this broken machine, like, oh, just find the faulty gear, replace it, and boom, the future is fixed. But human life just isn't a machine. It's a living weave. A hardship can wound one life but completely awaken another. To try and change the past without understanding this weave is literally like pulling a loose thread and discovering it was holding the entire seam together. And we see this butterfly effect in ordinary life all the time. In Eldoria, a clock strikes 1 second late. Just 1 second. But because of that, a baker mistimes his oven. Because the bread is ruined, a hospital runner is delayed. Over time, these tiny, seemingly harmless misalignments compound until a town's foundational trust actually breaks. It's a timeline of compounding consequence. It perfectly shows us that a ripple moves through these everyday carriers, our emotions, local rumors, rules, and even just plain hunger. So, at its absolute core, a cause is simply something that helps another thing happen. Simple enough, right? But the catch is, many causes are hidden by time, which is exactly why we constantly underestimate them. In our own lives, a cause isn't always some big dramatic event. It might be a neglected daily habit, an unspoken family truth, or even just a loose nail beneath a shelf. True wisdom begins by looking really closely at the humble things that everyone else just steps around. Moving on to part 2, the true cost of delay, the clockmaker's second. Once we actually understand that causes travel like threads, we have to look at what happens when we intentionally wait to address them. We shift from the magic of the world straight into the reality of human systems. We often think waiting is simple, don't we? Like, we don't move, so nothing happens. But what's changing while we aren't acting? Well, reality continues. Pressure continues building. Wood continues absorbing water. Trust continues leaning on uninspected structures. Delay is definitely not a pause button you can just press on the world. It is an active choice made inside a world that absolutely refuses to stop moving.
There's this breathtaking exchange in the book between Thomas Vey, the clockmaker, and Mara, who is this fierce defender of practical honesty. Bay had the fact that the clock was failing because he wanted to spare people from worrying until he had the perfect answer. He asks her, "Would you rather I had frightened people over a second?" And Mara just hits back with, "I would rather you had respected them enough to let them decide what a second meant." It really shows how delay often dresses itself up as protection or prudence.
Harmful delay is essentially an active system of avoidance. It uses really polite language, private shame, and good intentions to pass uncertainty and cost onto other people. Think about your own life for a second. Procrastination, a health concern you've ignored, a difficult conversation you keep pushing off to tomorrow. When we wait for perfect understanding before sharing a real risk, other people are forced to continue making decisions inside a world that no longer matches the truth.
Which brings us to part 3, the architecture of repair, a woven seam. So, if small causes weave our reality and delay fractures it, how on earth do we fix it? Well, Eldorate teaches us that understanding what went wrong is really only the first step. The real work is deciding how to restore function. And this totally dismantles our fantasy of a clean slate. Repair is not about erasing the past or magically rewinding time. The torn cloak remains visibly mended. The lost morning isn't erased, but a second, better morning is created. Repair is all about acknowledging the cost, naming the mismatch, and giving truth a better, safer sequence going forward.
There's a character named Sella who mends garments and systems alike, and she gently guides Alex's hand away from the center of a tear. She tells him the repair must borrow strength from what remains healthy. If you begin too close to the damage, you're asking the wounded part to carry the whole burden. What a beautiful metaphor, right? When we try to heal broken trust or a fragile process in our own lives, we can't ask the wounded place to carry all the work. We absolutely must anchor a repair in what is still strong.
Because of this, we start to realize that trust doesn't actually require perfection. Trust just requires the ability to notice, admit, and correct. Repair restores trustworthy motion without lying about history. It asks the hard questions. What function failed? Who carried the cost? What truth belongs in public? And honestly, this is incredibly liberating. A working relationship, a family, or a business project doesn't need to be completely flawless. It just needs an honest shape, walking apologies, and a real commitment to return to what wears down.
Let's look at part 4, the weight of choice, the convergence. When people finally understand how these causes travel and how repair actually works, they have to decide what kind of power they will become. This brings the lessons of Eldoria directly into our own hands. Consider the concept of opportunity cost. And we don't need any fancy technical jargon here. It's simple. Every single choice we make feeds one specific future, and by doing so, it leaves other possible futures completely unfed. It is the honest accounting of trade-offs. Our action is finite. A mature choice honors the unchosen paths by naming them, but it fully accepts the weight of the path it commits to. The keeper of the chrononexus gives Alex this incredibly profound warning. He says a future can be decorated at the front and unpaid at the back. We must never, ever let the beauty of a possibility replace the honest accounting of its cost. If we choose a path based only on its pleasant, decorated front, we are for sure going to be forced to eventually pay the hidden costs waiting in the back. And finally, part 5, first principles in motion, the working mind. So how do we actually take the magic and philosophy of Eldoria and use it as a framework for our own daily reality? We do this by developing what the book calls a working mind. Now, a working mind isn't some perfect brain that never makes mistakes. Not at all. It's simply a mind that knows how to return and repair. First, you observe reality. Just quietly notice the small signals. Second, ask why. Really question your first assumptions. Third, break problems down. Chunk the complexity so it doesn't terrify you. Fourth, test small pieces. Choose an action that has a visible, manageable cost. And finally, learn and rebuild. Record the feedback and repair whatever failed. Wisdom begins with understanding just one honest piece without panicking. If there is one absolutely crucial point to take away from our time together today, it is this. Wisdom doesn't just belong to grand, magical emergencies. It isn't strictly reserved for the glowing threads of the chrononexus. No, wisdom belongs wherever a small cause, a delivery note, a teacup near the edge of a table, a delayed conversation waits to be noticed before it becomes a massive regret. I want to leave you with this really lingering, provocative thought straight from Alex Mercer's own journal. If life is made of decisions, why do so many feel small while we make them, and enormous only after they are gone? As you step back out into your own fast-moving world, I encourage you to look closely at your small choices, trace their threads, And always remember that you have the power to repair the weave. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.